Video title. My son said, "There's no place for you, Dad," at my granddaughter's baptism, so I made a call. I never thought the coldest words I would ever hear would come from my own son. Not in a hospital room. Not in an argument, but inside a church, while holding a tiny white candle meant to symbolize new life. "There's no place for you, Dad." He didn't shout it. That's what made it worse. I remember the smell first. Polished wood, old hymn books, a faint trace of incense that clung to the air like memory itself. The stained glass windows painted soft blues and reds across the marble floor. It was my granddaughter's baptism, little Sophia. My first grandchild. I had ironed my only charcoal suit twice that morning. My hands shook while tying my tie, not because I was nervous, but because I wanted everything to be perfect. I wanted to be present. Not just physically, but fully. My son, Daniel, had sent the invitation 3 weeks earlier. A simple text. Baptism is Sunday at 11. Street. Marks. No emojis. No warmth. But still, an invitation. And that meant something. Daniel and I, we weren't what we used to be. But we weren't broken either. At least, that's what I believed. I raised him alone after his mother passed when he was 13. I learned how to braid hair before that, because he insisted on practicing on his sister when she was younger. I worked 2 jobs so he could attend a better high school. I sat through every football game, even the rainy ones where the stands were nearly empty. He used to look for me in the crowd. Always. And when he spotted me, he'd nod. Just once. That was our thing. A silent promise. "I see you." When I arrived at the church, Daniel was standing outside, talking to his wife's parents. They were polished, successful, the kind of people who always seemed freshly pressed, like life had never wrinkled them. I approached slowly, adjusting my coat. "Dad," Daniel said when he saw me. Just that. He didn't hug me, but he didn't step away either. I shook his father-in-law's hand. Firm grip, polite smile. His mother-in-law gave me a look that was pleasant, but measuring. Like I was furniture she wasn't sure matched the room. Still, I told myself not to overthink it. It wasn't about me, it was about Sophia. Inside, the pews filled quickly. Daniel and his wife, Clara, sat in the front row with the baby. Clara looked radiant but tired, the soft exhaustion of a new mother. I smiled at her, and she gave me a small nod. I chose a seat 2 rows behind them, close enough to feel included, far enough not to intrude. The ceremony began. The priest spoke about legacy, about faith passed from generation to generation, about the responsibility of family, to guide, to protect, to stand united. Each word settled heavy in my chest. Legacy. I thought of Daniel's first bicycle. The one I bought secondhand and repainted blue because he wanted it to look brand new. I stayed up until 2 a.m. sanding rust off the handlebars. I thought of the night he failed his math exam in 10th grade. He cried in the kitchen, convinced he'd ruined his future. I sat beside him and said, "One test doesn't define you. What you do next does." He studied harder than I'd ever seen. He passed the retake. We celebrated with cheap pizza and root beer. That was us, or at least, it used to be. Midway through the ceremony, Clara's father leaned forward and whispered something to Daniel. They both glanced back at me. It was quick, subtle, but I saw it. Daniel's jaw tightened just slightly. A red flag, maybe. But I pushed the thought away. When the priest asked the godparents to step forward, Clara's sister and her husband stood. I hadn't known who the godparents would be. Daniel never mentioned it. That stung a little, not because I expected the role, but because he hadn't talked to me about it at all. Still, I clapped softly with everyone else. Because that's what you do when you love someone. You show up, even when you're unsure where you stand. After the baptism, everyone moved to the church hall for a small reception. White tablecloths, coffee, finger sandwiches, a simple cake with pale pink frosting that read, "Welcome to the faith, Sophia." I waited my turn to hold her. When Daniel finally placed her in my arms, something inside me shifted. She was so small, warm, her tiny fingers curled instinctively around mine. "She's beautiful," I whispered. Daniel nodded. Yeah, for a moment, just a moment, I saw the boy he used to be. The one who would run into my arms after school. "Dad," he said quietly, "we need to talk later." My heart skipped. "Of course," I replied. "Anytime." His tone wasn't hostile, but it wasn't warm either. Just distant. As the afternoon went on, I noticed small things. Daniel's father-in-law directing the catering staff, even though this wasn't his church. Clara's mother introducing herself to guests as Sophia's grandmother, without once acknowledging me standing beside her. And Daniel, he moved around the room like a host, confident, composed, careful. But he didn't come back to me. Not once. At one point, I overheard Clara's father say, "It's important that Sophia grows up in the right environment." Right environment. The words echoed. What did that mean? Was I the wrong one? I've never been wealthy, never owned more than I needed. My house is small, my car is older than Daniel's marriage. But I gave him stability. I gave him love. Was that no longer enough? Late afternoon light streamed through the hall windows as guests began to leave. I was putting on my coat when Daniel approached. "Dad," he said, gesturing toward the side corridor. "Can we talk?" His face was calm, too calm. We stepped away from the noise. The hallway was quiet, just the hum of distant conversation and the faint scent of candle wax. For a second, I thought maybe he was going to thank me for coming. Maybe apologize for being distant. Maybe bridge whatever quiet gap had formed between us over the years. Instead, he took a breath. And what he said next split something inside me. "There's no place for you, Dad." I blinked. "I'm sorry," I asked, genuinely unsure I'd heard him correctly. He didn't raise his voice. "There's no place for you in Sophia's life the way things are." The hallway felt smaller, colder. "What are you talking about?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. He looked tired, not angry, just resolved. "Clara and I have decided we need boundaries. Your influence, your lifestyle, it doesn't align with what we want for her." Influence, lifestyle. I searched his face for a crack. For doubt, I found none. "I raised you," I said softly. "And I'm grateful," he replied quickly. Too quickly. "But that doesn't mean everything carries forward." That was when I understood. This wasn't spontaneous. This had been discussed, planned, agreed upon. I stood there, staring at the boy I once taught how to ride a bike, and realized I didn't recognize the man in front of me. The hallway door creaked open slightly behind us. Clara's father stood at the end, pretending not to watch. Suddenly, everything made sense. The glances, the whispers, the distance. Daniel wasn't alone in this decision. He'd chosen his new family's approval over mine. And in that moment, I felt something I never thought I would feel toward my own son. Not anger, not hatred, but displacement, like I had already been erased. Daniel cleared his throat. "I think it's best if you don't come by the house for a while." For a while. Temporary words that felt permanent. I looked past him, toward the hall where Sophia's faint cry echoed. My granddaughter. My blood. And I realized something quietly, painfully clear. If I walked away now, I might never be allowed back in. So I reached into my pocket, and I made a call. My son said, "There's no place for you, Dad," at my granddaughter's baptism, so I made a call. My hands didn't shake when I took out my phone. That surprised me. You'd think after hearing your own son quietly remove you from his life, your fingers would tremble. But they didn't. They felt steady, focused, because the call I was about to make wasn't born from anger. It was born from memory. Daniel watched me as I scrolled through my contacts. "Who are you calling?" he asked. His voice had a hint of caution now. I looked up at him, not with defiance, not with drama, but with something far heavier. "Someone who reminds me who I am." Then I pressed the name. Thomas Reed. Thomas and I met 28 years ago in a night accounting class. We were both exhausted men chasing stability. He had just lost his job. I had just buried my wife. We studied together, struggled together, built things together. When Daniel was 16 and wanted to start a small landscaping service during the summer, Thomas was the one who lent us his old truck. No paperwork, no interest, just trust. "Invest in the boy," he told me. "Not just money, confidence." Daniel still doesn't know that the first set of tools he used. Thomas bought them. Over time, Thomas and I co-founded a small property management company. Nothing glamorous, just steady work. I handled operations, he handled finances. We kept it modest. When Daniel graduated college, I offered him a position. Not handed, offered, entry level. He declined. He said he wanted to build something on his own. I respected that. What Daniel didn't know, what I never told him, was that I had quietly transferred my ownership shares into a family trust 5 years ago. For him, for his future family, for Sophia. Thomas knew. He was the co-trustee. And today, boundaries were being drawn. So yes, I made that call. Tom, I said when he answered. He recognized my silence before my voice. You okay? That's the kind of friend he is. The kind who hears the wait between words. I need you to meet me at St. Mark's, I said. There was no hesitation. On my way. I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Daniel frowned slightly. Dad, what is this? I studied his face. The same brown eyes he had at 10 years old. The same crease in his brow when he felt cornered. This is me respecting your boundaries, I said calmly. He looked confused. Good, because for the first time that afternoon, I wasn't the only one off balance. We walked back into the reception hall. Clara's father straightened when he saw us. Clara stood near the cake, gently rocking Sophia. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a scene. I simply waited. 15 minutes later, Thomas walked in. Navy blazer. Slight limp from an old knee injury. Calm as ever. He spotted me immediately. Then Daniel. Thomas greeted him warmly. Daniel. Been a long time. Daniel forced a polite smile. Mr. Reed. Thomas. He corrected gently. There was history here. Daniel had spent summers in Thomas's office as a teenager. Filing papers. Learning spreadsheets. Eating takeout with us on late nights. Thomas turned to me. You want to step outside? I shook my head. No, it's fine here. Daniel's shoulders stiffened. Clara approached slowly, sensing something unspoken. What's going on? She asked. I looked at her kindly. Because this wasn't about humiliating anyone. It was about clarity. Daniel just explained that there's no place for me in Sophia's life, I said evenly. Clara's eyes widened. She glanced at her husband. He didn't deny it. Thomas didn't react outwardly, but I saw his jaw tighten. I see, Thomas said quietly. I reached into my inner jacket pocket and removed a sealed envelope. Cream-colored, slightly worn at the edges. I handed it to Daniel. He hesitated before taking it. What's this? Something I prepared years ago, I replied, hoping it would one day feel like a gift. His fingers slid under the flap. Inside were copies of legal documents. Not complicated, not aggressive, just facts. The family trust, the structure of the company, the succession plan. Thomas spoke gently. 5 years ago, your father transferred his shares into a trust structured for you and your direct heirs. That includes Sophia. Daniel looked up sharply. What, you didn't think I kept working all these years for myself, did you? I asked softly. Silence stretched between us. Clara leaned slightly toward him, reading the pages over his shoulder. Her father took a step forward, curiosity replacing superiority. Thomas continued, calm and precise. The trust includes conditions. Nothing unusual, primarily centered on active family participation and relationship continuity. Daniel's expression changed. Relationship continuity, he repeated. I met his eyes. It means, I said quietly, that the trust was designed to support a family that remains a family. Clara's father cleared his throat. Are you implying? I'm not implying anything, I interrupted gently. I'm clarifying. Thomas added, if the beneficiary formally excludes the grantor from familial involvement without cause, the trust defaults to its secondary provision. Daniel swallowed. Secondary provision, I exhaled slowly. Educational foundations, I said. Scholarships. Community housing initiatives. Causes your mother believed in. I had chosen those carefully. Not as punishment, but as purpose. The room felt different now. Not louder, just heavier. Daniel's confidence wavered. For the first time since the hallway, I saw uncertainty. You're threatening to take it away? He asked, voice tight. No, I said firmly. I'm reminding you it was never something you were entitled to. It was something I hoped to give. Clara looked between us. Daniel, you didn't tell me about any of this. I didn't know, he muttered. Exactly, because I never wanted leverage. I wanted love. Thomas stepped back, giving us space. I looked at my son, really looked at him. I didn't come today expecting gratitude, I said quietly. I came because I wanted to stand in that church and promise to guide my granddaughter the way I guided you. Emotion flickered across his face. But if you truly believe there's no place for me, then I won't force one. I let the words settle. I just needed you to understand what no place actually means. The reception hall had gone nearly silent. Conversations had slowed. Eyes drifted toward us, not because I raised my voice, but because truth has a way of drawing attention. Daniel stared at the documents in his hands. The weight of them, the weight of me. Sophia began to cry softly in Clara's arms. That sound broke something open in the room. Daniel looked toward his daughter. Then back at me, and in that moment, I saw the crossroads in his eyes. Not greed, not pride, choice. He took a step toward me. Dad. But Clara's father placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. A subtle gesture, advising caution, advising control, and Daniel hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. I nodded once, the same silent nod we shared at his football games. I see you. Then I turned to Thomas. I think we're done here. We began walking toward the exit. Behind me, I heard Daniel call out, Dad, wait. I didn't stop immediately, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't chasing him. I was letting him decide whether to run toward me, or away. My hand reached the church door. The late afternoon sun poured in, warm and blinding, and just before I stepped outside, I heard his footsteps closing the distance.